there doing those last 2 or 3 boxes. So I've chucked it up in the 4-jaw chuck again, and I've just cleaned it up and faced it off. You get a nice clean face on it, and a whole bunch of rat's nest here. I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole through it now for purge gas. Right now I've got my center drill in there. I was just spot a hole on it, and I'm going to drill a hole all the way through it for the purge gas, and then I'm going to drill it out for an 1/8 inch pipe thread for a fitting on this end for that hose. Uh-oh, I just broke it. Oh, crap. Okay. This is the block that I'd cut off of this piece here, using for a chill block and a hole guide for making these boxes. Put that on the lathe and face these sides off again. They were getting a little chewed up from driving them out with the punch. And I took a drill bit and drilled a small hole all the way through. I started to drill pilot out on this side. I was going to do it on the center, but my center drill broke off in there. The pilot on the center drill broke off on there. I screwed that up, so I turned it around and offset it and drilled a hole all the way through it. And then I drilled it out here on this end and tapped it for 1/8 inch pipe thread and put this little nipple in there, and I can hook my hose up on there and use this to run argon through here and kind of back purge these things when I start putting them together. We'll see how that works. And I took a little skim cut all the way around here because this block was just a little bit big for these boxes here. It made it a little tough to get out. I've decided to go ahead and start working towards see if I can get a functional valve box here. I don't expect my first 1 or 2 of them to be right, but I thought I'd give it a try. My last try at doing this practice pieces still was not very satisfactory, but the places on it I was getting better. Well, I set up to do this one. This is one that has the 2-inch stainless steel tube in the end plate there, and then this box I put together has one of the 1-inch outlet tubes in it. So I've got it all set up now. I've made 2 beads, 2 welds here across this and this fillet weld, and I didn't do too bad on them. I'm not real happy with the way I'm doing it, but I am getting better at it. I almost got it to the point where I'd say I could do good, but it's just too erratic for me. I've got it set up here with my 2.5 inch block inside there. Of course, I drilled that and ported that, put a fitting on there, and I've got a gas line coming from my regulator to back purge this. And then I've got my 2-inch, or my piece with the 2-inch hole in it on here for a heat sink on there, and clamped down to my 2.5 inch square block, and I've got the 2-inch plug for that pipe down in there for a heat sink in that, and to help block off the gas flow. So I've got my first 2 welds done on the opposite sides there. Like I said, they're not bad, but they're not what I would like. I've got to move my clamps around so that I can get access to the other 2 sides on there now. I got my first box with the end here with the tube on it for the inlet tube. I got that welded on there. It's still pretty crappy, but I was starting to get better, and the last of this weld here I actually did pretty good. That turned out the way I'd like the whole thing to. I was getting better all the way along it, so I've got a piece that technically would be usable, even though it does look like crap. I'm going to do some more of these like this and keep practicing on this, so I still have to drill this out and put a valve in there, a butterfly valve or a valve for opening and closing, and then I still have to put an end on here, box this in, and so that'll still give me practice for that. Well, I'm making a little bit of progress on my cabin heat boxes. I did my first inlet plate on there, and it went okay. And then I tried something. I've got some silicone silicone, whatever it is, bronze brazing rod, and I tried to braze one of these up, and it actually turned out pretty good. But my brazing rod is 3/32, so it's really pretty much too big for this. But that's kind of impressive, really, and it doesn't burn the stainless steel. So I might try to get some 16th inch or some smaller silicone bronze rod and try that too. Anyway, this is my first box that I've got the end on, the inlet end on. Of course, this is the outlet, and I just made up a trial butterfly valve here. This is just a piece of the 24 gauge, same stuff as actually cut off the end of the strips that I had for these boxes. I'd cut it to fit inside of there, and then I've got some 1/4 inch tubing with a 3/16 ID on it, stainless steel tubing, and I got some 3/16 rod, and I cut off a couple little pieces, they're about 3/4 inch to an inch. It's immaterial how long it is, just short pieces. Cut off a short section of this 3/16 rod, put in there to hold it in together, to hold it in line, and then clamped everything down with a can't twist clamp and welded these tubes onto this piece of stainless steel. And I rolled this edge over a little bit here to see if I could get a tighter weld on there. Didn't really seem to make much difference, but this fits down inside of there pretty good, and it'll swing back and forth. So I've got to go drill a hole through here for the 3/16 rod to fit through, and I may take some stainless steel washers and weld on here for wear plates for bushings, bearings for it. Here's my first attempt at the butterfly, or the valve, control valve inside this box. I just took the box down to the shop and drilled a couple of holes in there for this 3/16 rod and lined it up, put it in there, and that it's not welded in yet, so but that works pretty good. Yeah, that thing works pretty good so far. Alright, I've got my control box set up here. I put the plug in the inlet tube there, the 2-inch tube that comes in, and taped it off, and then I run my argon hose, my purge hose in with just a little bit of aluminum foil wrapped around it to kind of plug that. That goes in the outlet hole. I just put a scrap piece of aluminum foil over the top of it just to kind of help hold it in. Now the argon is heavier than air, so it's got to have time to go in there, and it'll gradually go in and push the air up out of there and kind of flood the bottom of that with argon. Now I probably don't need it on this, but it's a learning experience for me, so I might as well try to do everything right and get it set up the way a person should do it. We'll let that flow for a couple minutes, then I'll take the top off and turn my welder on and see if I can't weld that shaft onto those bushings onto that butterfly valve. Okay, that's on there, and that works. I got that rod welded onto those two bushings in there, those two pieces of tubing in there, and only dipped my tungsten twice, once on each one, so that works pretty good. I'm happy with that. Went down to my aircraft parts hardware store, and I dug out some AN 960 C10 washers. 960 is a number for flat washer, for AN flat washer. C means stainless steel, and 10 is for a number 10 screw or a 3/16 an AN 3 bolt. I also got some, these are AN 526, they're 1032-8 screws. They're stainless steel, and those will be put in the arm that the wire then will go over these with a nut on them to hold the wire on. Anyway, I've got one of the washers positioned here over my pin, and I'm just gonna kind of try to spot weld that on there without blowing a hole. I just autogenously weld that on there using the washer, and try not to blow a hole through the sheet metal on that box. I'll put one, this is the bottom side, and put one on here, and then I'll put one on the top side. I got those washers welded on there for a bearing surface, for a wear plate for that shaft, both the top and the bottom, and I just kind of tacked them on there. They didn't need to be on there all the way around. I just welded them on real good on the corner, and that'll hold on good enough for what we need here. What did happen was the heat pulled those washers towards it, which pulled it against the shaft on both top and the bottom, which put the shaft in kind of a bind. And once I got done welding, when it was hot, I couldn't get that valve to move at all. So I stuck it in the freezer and let it cool off for a while, brought it out, and then I started working it, and I could get it to move a little bit by hand, and I just kept gradually working it and got it smoothed up. You couldn't move it like this by hand like before. It was pretty much free this way with my fingers here, and I just barely move it there now. Maybe if I take a punch and knock that down a little bit on there, that on both of those, that'll help. These washers were up in the air here where they got pulled up from that heat, both of them. I took a punch and flattened those out a little bit, and that really made a difference in this thing. It goes good now. Again, so I've got two more things to do on that. One is to make the arm like this for opening and closing that valve, and the other is to put the end cap on that, and I've got that cut out. I got this back plate, end plate welded all on there, and that went pretty good. I put my plug in here and then taped around it with some masking tape, and then I put my purge line in this hole here with some aluminum foil there and purged it for a while. I set this end cap on there, and I held it on with a little woodworking clamp to hold it down, and I used some 032 safety wire for that because the 045 rod, filler rod I got is just a little too big for that. It wind up making a big bead like this, but most of this was no filler at all, except for this one little spot here where there was a gap. Those welds inside there just look beautiful. Really happy with those. They turned out really nice. Well, I'm not unhappy with this on the outside here at all. Like I said, I had to use a little bit of filler rod here in a few spots where there's a little bit of gap or it didn't quite match up, so it's a little bit of a bead sticking up there, but all in all, it's pretty darn good, I think, for me. So here's the prototype, the first airbox completed. I've got my control arm on there. That's a piece of the 20 thousandths, 20 gauge, not 20 thousandths, that was cut off of these other pieces, and I just put a bend in it to give it some rigidity, some strength. It's got a 1032 screw welded in there, and it's welded on that shaft. So that one's all done.